In the caves of northeastern Mexico lives a fish that evolves as if it decided to set off a controlled explosion in its own eyes. It doesn't just gradually lose its vision with age, its eyes are literally programmed to self-destruct during development. The eye forms, looks promising for a few days, and then poof, and the eye is gone. And before you switch to poor little fish mode, let's pause for a moment. This is not a tragedy. Moreover, these creatures, figuratively speaking, have eye detonations like Voltorb from Pokemon. Plus, they have taste receptors on their foreheads, and somehow our favorite blue, super-fast hedgehog is literally involved here. So who is it? Well, meet Astyanax mexicanus, also known as the Mexican tetra. This species exists in two radically different forms. The regular river version, with eyes, coloration, and a pretty ordinary fish life, and the cave version, as if straight out of a Guillermo del Toro movie, which is rather symbolic. It is pale, almost transparent, with a skull that has empty eye sockets instead of eyes. And here's the most interesting part. These are not different species, or even subspecies. They are the same species. They interbreed freely and produce fertile offspring. At the same time, some cave populations are less than 20,000 years old. By evolutionary standards, that's literally yesterday. And an obvious question arises, why would a fish evolve to remove its own eyes? To understand this, you need to understand caves. They are not just dark places, they are an energy abyss. Darkness means almost zero photosynthesis, which in turn means almost zero basic food production. Dinner might consist of bat guano, washed in by a rainstorm, bacterial mats, or, if you're lucky, a dead cricket. Every calorie is worth its weight in gold. And imagine the landscape of northeastern Mexico, riddled with sinkholes and flooded cave systems. In some caves, collapsed ceilings let in rays of sunlight, while in others there is complete isolation, where day and night are as meaningless as choosing a starter Pokemon. The surface form of Astyanax mexicanus looks like a typical tetra, pigmented scales, functioning eyes, feeding on insects, algae and crustaceans, daily rhythms, and so on. They stick together in schools, sleep at night, and lead a perfectly respectable fish life. And then there are at least 30 cave-dwelling populations. And here's what's truly remarkable. This isn't a single lineage. They independently arrived at the same appearance. The data indicate at least 5 separate invasions of surface fish into different caves, involving 2 distinct genetic lineages, and all of them developed the same adaptations. This is convergent evolution in fast forward. Moreover, as already mentioned, these populations are less than 20,000 years old. For comparison, another strange cavefish, the Ozark cavefish, began to lose its sight about 11 million years ago. Mexican cavefish seem to be going through the whole process in speedrun mode, so what did they do? They chose biological minimalism. Eyes, gone. Pigmentation, disappeared. Circadian rhythms, cancelled. Social behavior, completely unsubscribed. Sleep, reduced from 8 hours to 2. From 1 o'clock to 2. Basically, almost every energy-consuming system was questioned. Do we even need this at all? Research confirms this picture. Scientists compared the metabolism of surface fish and their cave-dwelling counterparts in complete darkness. Surface fish, during what their internal clocks consider daytime, ramp up their metabolism, burning about 38% more energy under the same conditions. While surface fish keep their engines running at high speed, cave fish seem as if they've taken a sedative for life. In an environment with unstable food sources, this is the difference between life and death. And eyes in general are quite a luxury. In humans, just the retina alone requires enormous energy expenditure, constant regeneration of photoreceptors and information processing. For young fish, the cost of vision accounts for about 15% of their total metabolic budget. From the cave fish's perspective, 15% of energy spent on an organ that offers almost no advantage in complete darkness. But it's not just about the eyes. Blind cavefish have a significantly reduced midbrain, the part responsible for processing visual information. If visual information isn't needed, then why maintain the neural hardware? Interestingly, in cave fish embryos, eye development begins normally. The lens forms, the optic cup develops, everything appears standard, but then the lens cells initiate apoptosis, programmed cell death, which triggers a cascade of events and the collapse of the entire eye. How did scientists figure this out? Well, scientists conducted lens transplantation experiments. If you transplant the lens of a surface fish into a cave fish embryo, eye development is restored. But if you transplant the lens of a cave fish into a surface fish embryo, the eye degenerates. This means that the lens of the cave form actively initiates the degradation of what would otherwise become a normal eye. And the culprit, well, there are several, but one of the key genes is connexin 50. It encodes proteins that form gap junctions in the lens. Normally, these are communication channels between cells that allow them to talk to each other and coordinate their work. In cavefish, mutations disrupt these connections and the lens loses its structural integrity and simply, quite literally, collapses. To give you a sense of scale, introducing just a single mutation of this gene in mice leads to cataracts, smaller eyes, and a reduction in the size of the lens itself. And in cavefish, there are several such mutations, but sometimes it's not a binary story like either they can see or they can't. For example, the Caballo Mora cave is a system with so-called karst windows, areas where light penetrates, so the darkness there is not absolute. As a result, nature has set up a living experiment, the coexistence of sighted and blind fish. The distribution is predictable. Sighted fish are more often found in illuminated areas, while blind ones are found in the dark. But there is also a third type. Intermediate forms are hybrids that combine traits of both groups. And it's also important to remember that genes rarely work alone. And here, a second star player appears, Sonic. Yes, that's the actual name of the gene, and arguably one of the best in biology. In fish embryos, the Sonic gene, or SHH, balances the development of the eyes and the forebrain. An excess or deficiency of its activity produces the opposite effect. It enhances the development of one part of the head while suppressing the other. In cavefish, SHH expression is literally turned up to the maximum. The developing head is flooded with this signal, which sharply enhances the development of jaws and taste receptors while simultaneously suppressing the genes responsible for eye formation. And when I say that their taste receptors multiply, that's far from just a figure of speech. In surface-dwelling fish, taste receptors are located in the mouth, as is proper for respectable creatures, but in cavefish, they are scattered all over the head. Yes, this means they can taste something just by bumping it with their forehead. In the early stages of development, the number of taste receptors in the larvae of cavefish and surface fish is about the same, but about 5 months after hatching, the number of receptors begins to increase and continues to grow up to 18 months. Some researchers suggest that this growth may continue almost throughout their entire lives. As a result, cavefish end up not just with more taste receptors, but with strategically placed sensors at the points of first contact with potential food, that is, literally on their faces. And if you imagine having taste receptors on your own forehead, the prospect is rather unsettling. I don't know about you, but I live in a city, and to me, that's just a nightmare. Genomic studies show that some cave populations have significantly expanded genes for bitter taste receptors. They have 5 to 6 times more conserved genes and even pseudogenes responsible for detecting bitterness. And that makes sense. If your diet consists of mysterious cave slime, bat guano, dead insects, and other organic material of questionable origin, a toxin detection system becomes critically important. These fish are omnivorous scavengers, eating whatever they can find or whatever is brought in by the water. There is another important feature of these fish. All of them have a lateral line, a system of sensors called neuromasts that detect pressure and movement in the water. Surface fish also use it, but more as an auxiliary tool, especially in murky water or at night. For cavefish, the lateral line has become their primary sense. They have increased not only the sensitivity of the neuromasts, but also their size, especially in the area where their eyes used to be. How important is this? Well, when researchers destroyed these sensors in blind fish, they became clumsy, couldn't hunt, and even lost the ability to swim in schools. In surface fish, such damage is noticeable only in complete darkness. The change in the way information is processed also affected their hunting style. Sighted fish, such as zebrafish, make a sharp J-shaped turn, visually aligning themselves with their prey. Cavefish, on the other hand, perform a smooth C-shaped bend, orienting their entire body toward the source of the water vibration in one continuous movement, a reflection of their reliance on the lateral line. They have even evolved a slightly curved, asymmetrical skull shape, and researchers suggest entokwambats anzike konshu inawaits. They believe that this enhances the flow of water to one side of the head, optimizing sensory input. And it works! Mexican cavefish are able to detect prey at a greater distance than their sighted relatives. And here's another unexpected aspect. Vision and light are important for sleep. The daily cycle regulates circadian rhythms in us, the surface dwellers. Surface fish are no exception. They also sleep 8 to 10 hours a day. Cavefish, on the other hand, have reduced their sleep to about 2 hours. For a human, such a regime would almost certainly end in disaster, either directly or indirectly. And the key to this, aside from the loss of eyes, is the protein hypocretin, a neuropeptide that regulates sleep and appetite. Mutations in genes associated with hypocretin have literally reprogrammed cavefish for a state of constant light alertness. And it makes sense. In a cave, food appears unpredictably. Fall asleep, you lose, literally. But it's important not to get confused. The circadian clocks in cavefish have not disappeared. Their internal clock genes still function, but the system itself has been modified. The paradox is that their internal rhythm behaves as if they live in constant light, not in darkness. At the same time, the clock no longer drives powerful metabolic cycles like in surface fish, which helps conserve energy. Another strange difference is their attitude toward their own kind. Surface fish are aggressive. They establish dominance hierarchies through regular fights, and displays of aggression are commonplace. Cave fish, on the other hand, have almost completely lost aggressive behavior. Encounters between them occur 10 times less frequently, and often what looks like an attack is actually an attempt to find food. The fact that hungry cavefish become more aggressive only confirms this. They are not really fighting, but desperately searching for food. The behavioral differences are linked to changes in the serotonergic system of the brain, which essentially reflects a redistribution of resources from social behavior to food searching. Surface fish actively stay in schools and form relatively complex social structures. Cavefish, on the other hand, are more solitary. Interestingly, hybrids between cave and surface-dwelling forms exhibited an increased tendency for schooling behavior. However, the researchers suggest a more prosaic explanation: their insatiable appetite. Perhaps increased sociability is simply a convenience for cannibalism, since when food is critically scarce, protein is still protein, regardless of its source. It's not surprising if schooling disappears in a world where everyone potentially sees their neighbor as an emergency ration. Fortunately, the need to eat each other is somewhat reduced thanks to adaptations for energy storage. Cavefish are able to store up to 4 times more fat than surface fish when food is available. It's like doomsday preppers getting ready for the apocalypse, except for them, the apocalypse is just everyday cave life. But they are not the only ones. In the caves of the Dinaric Alps lives the European Olm, a pale salamander that has also become blind and albino, but has chosen a different strategy. Instead of increased activity, Olms have slowed everything down. They can live for over 100 years, survive for decades without food, barely move, and remain within a few meters for years. Imagining yourself spending years without any visual changes around you is already a psychological experiment in itself. And in North America, cavefish of the Amblyopsidae family have independently developed similar adaptations. And these are far from isolated cases. More than 200 species of cavefish are known, all demonstrating the same set of traits: loss of eyes, loss of pigmentation, enhancement of other senses, and so on, and the like. This even has a name: troglomorphy. That's what they call the set of traits that develop in cave-dwelling animals. This is one of the most striking examples of convergent evolution on such a scale and among such different groups of organisms. So, why did fish evolve in such a way that they lost their vision, a sense that is vital for most animals? Well, it actually stands to reason that this would be the case, especially when you consider that it makes perfect sense under these specific conditions.